Hey gang, and welcome to another exciting episode of Zoology Online. And today we're going to be talking about phylum Nematoda, also known as roundworms. So, a lot about these guys. So, phylum Nematoda, the word nematoda or nematodes means thread species, and this has to do with a lot of these worms are actually can be really long. And very thin, so they look like thread. So thread-like species seemed a good enough name for them. So they can be found in freshwater, marine water, and they can also be found in damp soil. But basically, they're found pretty much everywhere except for places where the ground's frozen. So everywhere except for Antarctica and like the tops of mountains that are constantly covered in snow. But they're pretty much everywhere. They're even on us right now. So yeah, they're found everywhere. One of the things that's neat about this phyla, as far as an evolutionary stance, is that they also have, just like the flatworms, they also have 3 germ layers. So we do call them triploblastic, meaning they have 3 layers. They do have bilateral symmetry, and they are pseudocoelomates. Now remember, the flatworms were acoelomates. These are pseudocoelomates. So they do have a body cavity, but their internal organs are not connected to the body wall by any type of tissue. So there's a space there, and there's nothing connecting the cells, the tissue in the middle, or excuse me, the tissue on the inside to the tissue on the outside. So they are defined as protosomes. So again, like everything else, these are all mouth first. So when they form in gastration, the first indentation becomes their mouth instead of their anus. But what is neat is that these have 2 openings. And I say it's neat they have 2 openings. This is the first time in the evolution of animal life on our planet where the digestive tract is one way. They have a separate mouth and a separate anus. So they eat food at one end at the mouth, it goes to the digestion, and then it goes out the anus. This is the first time we've seen this. All of the other phyla have not had this. Let's see, Cnidarians have a mouth/anus. Whatever they eat, whatever's left goes back out the mouth, and the same thing with flatworms. Whatever they took in their pharynx just went right back out of their mouth whenever they were done digesting. So neat. We got complete digestive system. They do have cephalization, so just like we saw in flatworms, they do have a head with sensory organs located in that region. They do have a pretty good nervous system, excretory system, and muscle system. No circulatory system yet, no respiratory system. They do have a reproductive system, as most things do. But those are 3 big systems that they do have. The one thing about this entire phyla that kind of sets them apart is that almost all of the species in this phyla are parasitic. So yes, we had some parasitic flatworms, but we also had a good portion that weren't parasitic. But most of these are going to be parasitic. The size ranges from 1 millimeter, which is really small, obviously, to 1 meter, which is about 3 feet in length. So they can actually be pretty big. And there's over 80,000 species in this phyla that we know of, and we estimate that there's anywhere between 500,000 to 1 million species that we have yet to discover, because these are so numerous. There's so many of them all over the place. A lot of them are really small and just exist in like places like soil or on our skin, or they're everywhere. So pretty widespread phyla. All right, so let's talk about their body plan a little bit. So we mentioned that they're pseudocoelomates. So again, they're going to have an ectoderm, they're going to have a mesoderm, and they're also going to have an endoderm. And that's why they're called triploblastic, because they have all 3 layers. So if you notice that here in the endoderm, and here's the mesoderm, there's the ectoderm, there's no connective tissue. There's no tissue connecting the mesoderm to the endoderm around this body cavity. So they do have a body cavity, but it's a pseudo cavity because there's no tissue connecting the inner layer to the middle layer. One of the reasons they are called roundworms is because their body is always in the form of a circle, whereas flatworms are flat. These are always going to be puffed up into a circle, and the way that they maintain that body shape and keep themselves circular without any type of skeletal system is that they use pressure. Their internal body pressure is 1.5 to 2.0 times the atmosphere. So there's high pressure. They just keep their body pressurized like a balloon. It just helps fill them up, and they stay nice and plump. And that's kind of how they do. So even though their body is filled up like with a high pressure on the inside, they're still pretty elastic and they're able to move. So the cuticle that covers them, that protects them, is actually flexible, and it allows them to be able to move through a fluid. It also allows for the diffusion of oxygen and water in, carbon dioxide and waste material out. So it's a pretty good little system that they have going on. For their nervous system, roundworms actually do have a pretty highly developed nervous system compared to things like flatworms. They have what's called a pharyngeal nerve ring, and you can see it here on the diagram. It's this little blue circle right here. So it's not a cerebral ganglia. That was a large mass of nervous tissue. This is it's a mass of nervous tissue, but it's not in a clump. This makes a ring around the pharynx, and periodically on the ring they'll have these things, little ganglia, these little brains that are on that nerve ring. So it's not a cerebral ganglia because that'd be a large mass at the front. This is a ring that goes around their pharynx, so it's called a pharyngeal nerve ring, and it kind of acts as a rudimentary brain. From there, they have 2 to 4 long longitudinal nerve cords that run essentially on their belly. It runs on their ventral side down their body. And this helps to coordinate the movement of the muscles, so that way they can propel themselves and help move through water. At the front of their body, on the anterior end, they have what we call amphids. Amphids are chemoreceptors, so they're just a detection service for chemicals. So they can detect prey, or they can detect predators in the water. They can see where food's going to be. But they can detect where it's going to be through these chemoreceptors. And that helps them interact with their environment and respond to changes in their environment. But they're called amphids, and they're up on the front end. And in most cases, when you look at them under a microscope, you can actually see the little dots located near the head, where that's the entrance point for chemicals to come in. So when they feed, essentially, like we mentioned, a good portion of these are going to be predatory, but not all are. And so there's some differences between how different species actually will feed based on what they eat. But all in all, they also have a complete digestive system. Remember, they have one mouth and a separate anus. We mentioned their protozoans, their mouth comes first. They do have 3 lips, which is extremely interesting to look at. So you can see here an example. This is a predatory species. And it has teeth on these 3 lips. Herbivorous species have something a little bit different. In order for them to be able to catch food, they're eating like algae and stuff that just float around the water. They have what's essentially called a stylet, and it's a little hard spike that they can jet out of their mouth real fast, and it acts like a fork and just sticks into the algae, and then they can use that to pull back into their mouth. Other big predatory species, again, they have these teeth that are different shape for different species, and they use to clamp down on their prey and help keep them, hold on to them, and ingest them. So they do have a pharynx. It is up towards the front, the anterior side, usually their mouth is usually right at the tip of their body, which is different from most flatworms because they don't have the mouth of a flatworm. The pharynx is actually like in the middle of their body, and that pharynx extends out. These guys, complete digestive system, remember, so their mouth's actually all the way down to one end. So that pharynx acts like a suction cup. So whenever, or not a suction cup, but like a vacuum cleaner essentially. So whenever they start getting things in their mouth, the pharynx just sucks it rest of the way in. It's kind of how they bring the food rest into their body once they catch it. Now, because of the high pressure that's inside of their body, their intestines are actually triangle shaped. And it's triangle shaped. It's not an exact triangle, but it's triangle shaped. That's because the pressure from the outside pushes the otherwise round intestines. It pushes them kind of into a triangle, which is just kind of a neat thing to notice. But whenever if you're to dissect one, it may not look triangular, because if you're cutting it open, you're releasing the pressure, and the intestines may take a different shape. But what is neat to know about this, whenever they actually go through excretion and they're removing waste from their body, when they poop, because of the high pressure on the inside, their poop is actually projected. So some species can actually poop up to 2 feet away because of the high pressure that's inside their bodies, which is gross, but it's actually really pretty cool. So here's some examples of the different mouth parts that some different species have. So these are some free-swimming roundworms. Here we have a predatory roundworm who's actually caught another species of roundworm. This probably is a herbivorous species of roundworm, and you can kind of see how that pharynx is going to act like a suction tube and just pull that guy right on in. And here we have another predatory species. We can see the 3 lips and the teeth that are on there that allows them to catch and hold on to their prey. I think that's really cool looking. Kind of reminds me of the Demogorgon from Stranger Things. So that's pretty neat. Cool.